All right, today we're going to dive into a battle that was, honestly, almost a complete disaster for the early Muslims. I'm talking about the Battle of Uhud. Now, this is a story of some absolutely incredible heroism, but it's also a story of really profound loss. It's one of those moments in history, a real crucible that forged lessons in courage and redemption that, believe me, still resonate today.
And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? Our central question for this whole thing. See, the Battle of Uhud, this was a moment of absolute, total crisis for that early Muslim community. It pushed their faith, their resolve, their loyalty to the absolute limit. So how is character forged in a crucible of chaos like that?
Okay, so let's set the scene here. Picture this. The battle has taken a disastrous turn. I mean, what was supposed to be a solid strategic advantage has just completely devolved into chaos. And right in the middle of all of this, the Prophet himself is isolated, he's surrounded by enemy soldiers, and there's only a tiny handful of his companions left to protect him.
So at this absolute critical moment, with an entire army bearing down on them, you want to know how many defenders were left standing? Just 9. That's it. 9. 7 from the Ansaaree and 2 others. Think about that. 9 people as the very last line of defense against a whole tide of warriors.
But this is where the story completely pivots. It goes from impending disaster to one of the most incredible last stands you'll ever hear about. Those few who were left, they formed a literal human shield. And what they did in these next few moments, well, it became legendary.
And what's so incredible here is just how different each act of heroism was. You've got Talhah, whose one-man defense was just ferocious. Then there's Nusaybah, a woman who had been on the sidelines tending to the wounded. She sees what's happening, grabs a sword, and just jumps right into the fight. Then you have Abu Dujana, who literally shielded the Prophet with his back, taking arrow after arrow. And all the while Saad, one of the most skilled archers they had, is just firing relentlessly.
But I want to zoom in on Talhah for a second, because this is the ultimate I'll take a bullet for you moment. Seriously, as the other defenders start to fall around him, he sees an arrow flying straight for the Prophet's face, and without a single second of hesitation, he just throws his own hand up to block it. That arrow paralyzed his hand for the rest of his life, but it saved the Prophet. And it doesn't even end there. After all that, Talhah, wounded, exhausted, helps carry the Prophet up the mountain to safety. And it's then that the Prophet makes this incredible declaration about him. And that, right there, is why Talhah became known for the rest of his days as the living martyr.
But all of that raw courage, it came at a terrible cost. The aftermath of the battle was just a scene of profound loss. And no death was more tragic or more personally devastating than the death of one of the community's absolute greatest warriors.
We're talking, of course, about Hamzah, the Prophet's own uncle. This was a man so fierce, so powerful in battle, that they called him the Lion of God. So his death, I mean, it wasn't just losing a great soldier. This was a deep, deep personal blow to the Prophet himself.
But here's the really crucial part. The Lion of God didn't fall in some honorable face-to-face duel. No, it was a targeted assassination. A man named Wahshee, an enslaved man who was incredibly skilled with a spear, was promised his freedom for one thing and one thing only: to kill Hamzah. So for Wahshee, this wasn't about the battle at all. It was purely a business transaction.
And we actually have Wahshee's own words on this from the historical sources. It's a chilling, first-person account. He describes hiding, just waiting for that perfect moment, and then striking Hamzah from a distance. No face-to-face combat, just one single, cold, calculated throw of his spear.
When they found the body, it was just a moment of profound human grief. When the Prophet came across his uncle, he saw that the enemy hadn't just killed him, they had horrifically mutilated his body. The sources say he just stood there over the body and wept. It was a terrible, terrible, brutal loss.
So, how does a community even begin to process this level of trauma, this level of grief? Well, what happened next would actually set a whole new standard for dealing with loss, and it led to a major cultural shift.
And this contrast is really the key to understanding that shift. On one side, you had the old pre-Islamic custom of a niyaha. This was, loud, public, almost performative wailing. It was a way to show your grief for everyone to see. But on the other side, a brand new ideal was taking hold. It was embodied by people like Hamzah's own sister, Safiya, who showed this incredible, stoic patience, a quality they called sabr.
So when the Prophet heard all the wailing for the other martyrs, he totally acknowledged their pain. But then he forbade the practice of an-niyaha,
And this was a huge defining moment. It wasn't about suppressing grief, not at all. It was about transforming it. This was a deliberate choice to build a new identity for the community, one that wasn't based on public displays of despair, but on the quiet strength of dignity and faithful patience, even in the face of horrible tragedy.
And then in the middle of all this grief, right as this new identity of patience is being forged, something really remarkable happens. As the survivors gathered on the mountain, a kind of divine peace descended on them. A verse in the Quran actually describes it as a slumber that overtook the true believers. And this wasn't just them being exhausted. No, it was seen as a gift of security, straight from God. A moment of tranquility that was like a promise. Even in your darkest hour, you are not alone.
But that leaves one big, lingering question, right? What happened to Wahshee, the man who caused so much of this pain, the one who set this whole wave of grief in motion? You'd probably expect a story of vengeance, but instead, what comes next is one of the most complex and honestly, one of the most powerful stories of redemption you will ever come across.
So for years after Uhud, Wahshee lives as a free man, just as he was promised. But then, when the Muslims eventually conquer Makkah, he becomes a fugitive. He's terrified for his life. And so what does he do? He eventually seeks out the one man whose uncle he killed. He goes to the Prophet and he embraces Islam.
And the Prophet accepted his conversion. You see, Islamic teaching says that a sincere conversion wipes the slate clean. It erases past sins. But the human pain was still there. The Prophet made this request to Wahshee. It wasn't him rejecting his faith, not at all. It was just that looking at Wahshee brought back the raw trauma of his uncle's death. It's such a profoundly human moment, isn't it?
So where do you go from there? What was the path forward for Wahshee? Well, he was advised that the best way to atone for a great sin is to do its exact opposite. Think about it. He had used his unique, incredible skill with the spear to weaken the Muslims and kill one of their greatest heroes. So now, he had to use that very same skill to serve the cause he once harmed.
And this is where you see this almost tragic symmetry to his life. Years later, during another major battle, Wahshee uses the exact same spear, the exact same skill to kill one of Islam's greatest enemies, a false prophet named Musaylama, who was known as the Liar.
You know, there's this quote from Wahshee himself that just perfectly captures his whole journey. He totally understood the terrible weight of what he'd done, but he also got the significance of his redemption. With the very same weapon, he took two monumentally important lives at the complete opposite ends of the moral spectrum.
And that whole story, the story of Wahshee and the Prophet, it leads us to this final, really deep question. It shows us that while an act can be forgiven and a person can be accepted, the deep human scars of trauma, they can remain. It's such a powerful lesson on the complexities of forgiveness and atonement and memory. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most important takeaway from the entire story of Uhud.